David never thought he'd be starting over at 34. His life had become a routine of work, gym, and weekend grocery shopping. After his marriage ended, he built a comfortable bubble around himself. No drama, no heartbreak, just the steady rhythm of designing buildings and going home to his quiet apartment. Everything changed when his architecture firm merged with another company. That's when he met Lisa, a structural engineer who had a reputation for being brilliant and a bit intimidating. She had this way of walking into a room that made everyone pay attention. Her presentations were flawless, her calculations perfect, and she had this laugh that could break through the most boring meetings. Their first real conversation wasn't planned. A difficult client had everyone stressed out, and most people had given up trying to solve the problem. David was working late, staring at blueprints that weren't making sense anymore. Around 9 in the evening, there was a knock on his door. Lisa stood there holding 2 paper cups of the worst coffee the office had to offer. "I figured you could use some company," she said, sliding into the chair across from his desk. "This project is driving everyone crazy. But I have an idea." They talked for hours that night. Not just about work, but about why they loved what they did. Lisa saw buildings the same way he did, like puzzles waiting to be solved, like art made of concrete and steel. She told him about her 15-year-old daughter who wanted to be a doctor and how proud she was. David noticed the wedding ring on her finger and made a mental note to keep things professional. But something about that night felt different. Maybe it was the way she leaned forward when she explained her ideas, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Maybe it was how she actually listened when he talked, not just waiting for her turn to speak. By 2 in the morning, they had cracked the problem that had stumped everyone else. As weeks turned into months, they became the office's go-to team. Their designs won awards, but more than that, they had become real friends. Lisa would stop by his desk with stories about her daughter's school drama. And somehow, David found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone about why his marriage had failed. She had this way of making him feel heard, not judged, not pitied, just understood. When he talked about feeling like he'd failed at the one thing that was supposed to matter most, she didn't give him empty reassurances. She just said, "Sometimes the right thing and the easy thing aren't the same. You did what you had to do." The office had a rhythm to it. Morning coffee runs, afternoon design reviews, Friday team lunches. Lisa fit into his life so naturally that David didn't notice how much he looked forward to seeing her until she took a week off for vacation. The office felt empty without her energy, without her quick wit, and the way she could diffuse tension with a single joke. When she came back, something seemed off. She was quieter, more careful. During a team meeting, she wore a turtleneck, despite the summer heat. David caught himself watching her more closely, noticing small things. The way she startled when someone entered a room suddenly. How she checked her phone constantly, her face tightening with each message. One afternoon, they were reviewing designs together when her phone rang. David saw the name Robert flash on the screen. Her whole body went tense. She answered with a bright, cheerful voice that sounded nothing like her real one. "Yes, honey, I'll be home by 6. I promise." "No, I'm not working late." "Yes, I know." "Okay. Love you too." When she hung up, the brightness vanished from her face. She looked exhausted, older somehow. David wanted to ask if she was okay, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he just said, "You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here." She gave him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know. Thank you." But David couldn't shake the feeling that his friend was carrying a weight she shouldn't have to bear alone. He'd seen that look before. In his sister's eyes years ago, when she was in a relationship that was slowly crushing her spirit. The thought kept him awake that night, and he realized with startling clarity that Lisa had become more important to him than he'd wanted to admit. He told himself to stay out of it, that it wasn't his business, that he was probably reading too much into things. But deep down, he knew something was wrong, and he couldn't just look away. The next few months were strange. Lisa seemed to be living two different lives. At work, she was still the brilliant engineer everyone admired, still cracking jokes and solving impossible problems. But David noticed the cracks in the facade. She wore long sleeves, even on hot days. She jumped at loud noises. Her daughter stopped appearing in her stories. The office decided to throw a party to celebrate landing a major client. Everyone was celebrating, music playing, people laughing and enjoying themselves. That's when Robert showed up. He was tall, handsome, the kind of man who commanded attention. He walked straight to Lisa, wrapped his arm around her waist, and kissed her cheek. "There's my beautiful wife," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I hope you're not working too hard." "Too." Lisa's smile looked painted on. "Just celebrating with the team." "Well, don't stay too late. You know how I worry." His grip on her waist tightened just slightly, and David saw her wince. Robert worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and charming everyone. But David watched Lisa. He saw how she became smaller in her husband's presence, how her natural confidence evaporated. When Robert finally left, promising to have dinner ready at home, Lisa excused herself to the bathroom. She didn't come back for 20 minutes. David found her standing in the hallway outside the office, staring out the window at the city lights below. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay? Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Because we care about you. Because something's wrong, and we can see it." Lisa turned to face him, and for a moment, he thought she might tell him everything. David wanted to push, wanted to tell her that he knew she was lying, but he didn't. Instead, he just stood there with her. Two people looking out at a city full of lights, each carrying their own loneliness. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning. Lisa didn't show up for work. No call, no text, nothing. This wasn't like her at all. She was always early, always prepared, always reliable. By 10 in the morning, David couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his keys and drove to her house. His hands shook as he rang the doorbell. No answer. He tried calling her phone again. Still, nothing. Then he noticed her car in the driveway, engine off, and Lisa sitting in the driver's seat, completely still. He walked over and tapped gently on the window. She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. For a long moment, they just stared at each other through the glass. Then she slowly opened the door and stepped out. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Where else would I be? You're my friend, and I've been worried sick. David, you don't understand. You can't be here. If he finds out what? That someone cares about you? That someone noticed you're hurting?" Something in her face crumbled. The strong, confident woman he knew seemed to collapse inward. And then, standing there in her driveway in the middle of a Thursday morning, she started telling him everything. 15 years. That's how long it had been. It started small. She said. Robert would get angry about little things, criticize her clothes, her friends, her career choices. Then came the isolation. He convinced her that her family was toxic, that her friends were jealous, that she was lucky to have him because no one else would put up with her. "I thought I was strong," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it. I kept telling myself it would get better, that he was just stressed, that I needed to try harder, to be a better wife." The criticism turned into control. He tracked her phone, monitored her emails, questioned every minute she spent away from home. And when control wasn't enough, it became something worse. She didn't say the words, but David understood. He saw the fear in her eyes, the way she kept glancing at her house, like it was a prison. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "I've kept this secret for so long. Why now?" Why you? David reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. Because you know, I won't judge you. Because you know I'll help. Whatever you need. However long it takes. Lisa looked down at their hands, and something shifted in her expression. Not hope exactly, but maybe the possibility of hope. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying her burden alone. The next few weeks were the hardest of Lisa's life. With David's support, she started making a plan. She talked to a lawyer, learned about her options, and began documenting everything. David never pushed her, never told her what to do. He just showed up, steady and reliable, whenever she needed him. Her daughter knew something was changing. At 15, she was old enough to sense the tension in the house, old enough to have seen things she shouldn't have seen. One night, Lisa sat her down and told her the truth. They were going to leave. It would be hard, and it would be scary, but they would be okay. Her daughter cried. But then, she said something that broke and healed Lisa's heart at the same time. I'm glad, Mom. I've been so worried about you. David helped them find a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Safe. He helped them move while Robert was at work, carrying boxes and furniture with a quiet determination. When everything was in the new place, Lisa stood in the empty living room and cried. Not sad tears exactly, but the overwhelming emotions of someone who just walked out of a cage. The legal process was brutal. Robert fought everything, tried to paint Lisa as unstable, tried to use the system against her, but she had documentation now. Witnesses, a paper trail of his behavior. The restraining order came through first, then the divorce proceedings began. Through it all, David was there. He came to court hearings when she needed support. He helped her daughter with homework when Lisa was too exhausted to function. He fixed things in their apartment, brought groceries when money was tight, and sat with Lisa through the panic attacks that came in waves. People at work started noticing. Not just that Lisa and David were close, but the way they moved around each other, like two planets caught in the same orbit. Her friend Karen pulled her aside one day at lunch. You two have something special, she said. I've never seen David like this with anyone. Lisa always deflected these comments. We're just friends. He's helping me through a difficult time. Lisa. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, Lisa thought about David. About the way he'd never asked for anything from her. About how he'd seen her at her absolute worst and hadn't run away. About the way her heart beat faster when his name appeared on her phone screen. She wasn't ready for anything romantic. Maybe she'd never be ready. The idea of trusting another man, of letting someone that close again, terrified her. But David wasn't pushing. He seemed content to just be there, to be her friend, to show up day after day without expecting anything in return. 6 months after leaving Robert, Lisa started feeling like herself again. She laughed more easily. She took her daughter to movies and museums. She joined a support group and made new friends who understood what she'd been through. Her work improved, and she got a promotion. One Friday evening, her daughter asked if she could sleep over at a friend's house. Lisa said yes, then found herself alone in her apartment for the first time in months. The silence felt strange, not peaceful, just empty. She picked up her phone and texted David, I don't want to be alone tonight. He arrived 30 minutes later with pizza and a movie. They sat on her living room floor because she still hadn't bought proper furniture. They ate directly from the box and argued playfully about whether the movie's ending made sense. Around midnight, when the movie was long over, and they'd talked about everything from childhood memories to career goals, Lisa looked at David. Really looked at him. At the man who'd become her anchor, her safe place, her friend, when she'd needed one most. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why did you do all this? You could have walked away. Most people would have. But you stayed. You helped me and my daughter. You showed up for court dates. You fixed our leaky faucet. Why? David was quiet for a moment. Then, he said something that changed everything. Because from the first night we worked together, I saw who you really were. Not the mask you wore at work. Not the role you played at home. The real you. And that person was worth fighting for. Worth waiting for. Worth every single moment. Lisa felt something crack open in her chest. All the fear. All the walls she'd built. All the reasons she'd given herself for why she couldn't do this again. In that moment, they all seemed smaller than the man sitting across from her. She reached out, took his hand, and pulled him closer. The kiss surprised them both. Not because they hadn't thought about it, but because it felt so natural, so right. When they pulled apart, Lisa's eyes were wide. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have." "Don't," David interrupted gently. "Don't apologize. Not for this. But I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for." "Then we'll take it slow. As slow as you need." And he meant it. Their relationship developed at Lisa's pace. Some days, she wanted to hold his hand. Other days, the idea of physical closeness made her anxious, and David would just sit nearby. Present but not demanding. He learned to read her signals. To understand when she needed space, and when she needed comfort. Her daughter took to David naturally. He wasn't trying to replace her father. Wasn't trying to be something he wasn't. He just showed up for school plays, helped with science projects, and listened when she needed to talk. Over time, the apartment started to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a home. The divorce was finalized 8 months after Lisa left. Robert fought until the very end, but eventually, he had no choice but to sign the papers. Lisa stood in the courthouse hallway afterward, holding the documents that officially ended her marriage, and felt lighter than she had in 15 years. Work became easier too. Without the constant stress of her home life, Lisa's creativity flourished. She and David started a side project, designing affordable housing for families in need. It was meaningful work, the kind that reminded them why they'd chosen this career in the first place. Their colleagues stopped asking if they were dating and just accepted that they were together. The relationship didn't look like everyone else's, but it worked for them. Some evenings, they'd work late at the office, bouncing ideas off each other. Other times, they'd have quiet dinners at Lisa's apartment, the three of them becoming an unlikely family. Lisa had to learn how to trust again. It wasn't easy. Sometimes, when David raised his voice during a heated discussion about work, she'd flinch. When he disagreed with her, part of her brain still expected punishment. But David was patient. He'd lower his voice, give her space, and show her through his actions that disagreement didn't mean danger. Therapy helped. Lisa saw a counselor who specialized in helping survivors of difficult relationships. She learned that healing wasn't linear, that there would be good days and bad days, and that asking for help wasn't weakness. 1 year after leaving Robert, Lisa and David decided to start their own architecture firm. It was a risk, but they'd saved money and had enough clients to make it work. They signed the lease on a small office space and spent weekends painting walls and assembling furniture. The day they opened their doors, Lisa's daughter cut the ribbon they'd hung across the entrance. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said, and Lisa had to blink back tears. Their firm grew slowly but steadily. They built a reputation for innovative designs and ethical practices. More importantly, they created a workplace where people felt valued and heard. Lisa hired other women who'd been through similar experiences, giving them chances when other firms wouldn't. On the anniversary of the day they first kissed, David took Lisa to dinner. Nothing fancy, just the small Italian restaurant where they'd had their first official date. Over pasta and wine, he pulled out a small box. "Before you panic," he said with a smile, "this isn't what you think it is." Inside was a key. "It's to my apartment," he explained. "I'm not asking you to move in. I'm not asking you to marry me. 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 I'm not asking you to marry. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm just saying that whenever you want to, whenever you're ready, there's a space for you in my life. No pressure, no timeline, just an open door. Lisa took the key, tears running down her face. Not sad tears, not scared tears, but the tears of someone who'd finally found something she didn't know she'd been looking for. 2 years after that rainy Thursday when everything changed, Lisa and David stood in the office of the firm they'd built together. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, the sunset painting everything gold and orange. They'd just finished presenting a major project to a client, and it had gone perfectly. "We make a good team," David said, coming to stand beside her. "The best," Lisa agreed. Her daughter was 17 now, applying to colleges, dreaming big dreams. She wanted to study medicine, to help people the way people had helped her mother. David had become the father figure she'd always needed. Not by trying too hard, but by simply being present, reliable, and kind. The office threw them an engagement party when they finally announced they were getting married. It had taken Lisa 3 years to get to this point. 3 years of healing, and growing, and learning to trust again. David had waited patiently, never pushing, always supporting. Karen cornered David at the party, wine glass in hand and a knowing smile on her face. "You know, when you two first started working together, I never would have predicted this. The way she pulled you closer, the way you two found each other. Nobody saw it coming." David looked across the room to where Lisa was laughing with their team, her daughter by her side. "I almost didn't see it coming either. But you know what? The best things in life are worth waiting for. What people didn't understand, what they couldn't see from the outside, was the real story. It was that he'd given her something revolutionary. The space to heal. The freedom to choose. The safety to love on her own terms. He'd shown her that not all men were like Robert. That love didn't have to hurt. That relationships could be partnerships. That she deserved respect and kindness and patience. He'd proven it through actions, not words, day after day, month after month. The wedding was small, just close friends and family in a garden ceremony. Lisa's daughter walked her down the aisle. When David saw Lisa in her simple white dress, tears streaming down his face, she knew she'd made the right choice. Their vows were personal, honest. Lisa promised to keep trusting. To keep choosing love, even when fear tried to pull her back. David promised to keep being patient. To keep showing up. To keep creating a safe space for her to be herself. After the ceremony, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Lisa thought about how far she'd come. From that woman sitting in her car, trapped and hopeless, to this moment of joy and celebration. The journey had been hard, sometimes impossibly hard, but she'd made it. Their firm continued to grow. They hired more people, took on bigger projects, and made a real difference in their community. But more than the professional success, they built a life together. A life based on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine partnership. Lisa still had difficult days. Anniversaries of bad memories would hit her out of nowhere. Sometimes, she'd wake up from nightmares, and David would hold her until the fear passed. But those days became less frequent, the good memories slowly outnumbering the bad. Her daughter graduated high school with honors and got accepted to her dream college. At the graduation party, she gave a speech thanking her mom for being strong enough to leave, and thanking David for showing her what a good man looked like. 5 years after that first kiss, Lisa woke up in the house they'd bought together. David was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. Their dog was sprawling across the bed, and sunshine was streaming through the windows. She lay there for a moment, taking it all in. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of peace. Not perfection, but partnership. Not fairy tale romance, but real, hard-earned love. She got up and padded into the kitchen. David handed her a cup of coffee, kissed her forehead, and asked about her plans for the day. Such a simple moment. But to Lisa, it was everything. The freedom to have plans, to make choices, to live without fear. Looking back, she could see how every difficult step had led her here. The courage it took to tell David the truth. The strength required to leave. The patience needed to heal. The bravery of letting someone close again. People often asked her for advice, other women in similar situations, seeking hope. She always told them the same thing. Your story isn't over. The hard chapters don't define you. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to reach out, someone reaches back and changes everything. David had been that person for her. Not a savior, because she'd saved herself, but a partner, a supporter, a friend who became something more. Together, they'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. As they sat together drinking coffee, planning their day, Lisa realized that this was the ending nobody had seen coming. Not dramatic or explosive, but quiet and steady and real. The kind of love that grows slowly, that weathers storms, that chooses to show up every single day. And in the end, that was the best kind of love there was.